Hello, listeners and
Good day.
watchers.
Welcome to the Q&A podcast.
we've got a number of in-house sound techs here at Living Springs.
We do.
We've got one though that's saw the intro, liked it, really enjoyed it, but has offered to record voice over it.
Oh, really?
So though anybody who's watching is reading in that new intro, we've been using the words that come up. The audio listeners get the music part of it, but they don't know what the words are saying. So we might have somebody read in over that.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, so it'll one of our in-house sound techs.
Perfect.
Yeah, totally.
That would be good.
We don't hear it. It's kind of awkward on this end.
Yeah,
Just
I was going to say,
studio
is there
stuff.
music to it? I guess I should watch the Q&A podcast, and then I would hear that, right? So
It's hard to watch stuff when you're in it. I don't know if you find that,
Yeah,
with this and teaching.
I already heard you say what you're saying once. I know.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't need to hear my voice twice. But
Right on.
I got some feedback from our last one, and Doug made a comment last week actually about there were some questions that came in that ended up being weeks later that we probably could have pulled up forward, and so that got me thinking, you know what, we should try to keep this a little bit more engaged as a live thing, because now that we've got this awesome backlog that we love and are looking forward to all these questions, I'm sure it can be on the listener side of things feeling like it's a little stale,
Yeah.
because it's so distant from getting when you ask your question or engage with it. So I got a couple comments that I thought, let's do a quick little segment at the beginning
Right on.
that brings in some feedback. So one listener commented, and I'm just going to call him out by first name, Cole. Cole had an argument with what we had to say last week.
Yeah.
It was big, it was deep, it was profound. It was that there's no way sheep are the dumbest animals because Cole has met chickens, and chickens are the dumbest animal.
All right.
And I took personal offense to that.
So you're calling Cole out right in the middle of the
Yep.
podcast? Just
Cole,
like-
you have started this new segment and you're getting called out. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't take any offense. They're dumb. They dumb.
I would like to do some research. I did see this comment, and I even thought last week, I think it was Doug that said sheep are the dumbest animals.
Yeah.
And I haven't worked a lot with sheep, a little bit.
Yep.
I haven't worked with chickens at all.
Yeah.
Worked with cattle a lot. Cattle are not bright. So I wonder which animal really does need the most help. Is
Yeah.
it really sheep? Is sheep the
Well, I did kind of laugh. These are tossing Doug under the bus while he's away.
right?
I did laugh that Doug makes comments on animals because he's got to be, out of the three of us, the least engaged with farm life
This
ever.
is true,
Like,
yes.
not even just currently, but his whole life, that making judgments on animals and their intelligence, I don't feel like he's that connected to.
No, I wonder, did he have pets when he grew up? I know
I don't
they
know.
had a dog. When we met Lorley and Doug,
Okay.
they had a black lab.
Right.
So he'd know a little bit about dogs.
Yeah,
But
there you go.
otherwise, I don't know.
Doug, if you're listening while we're away, maybe that's my heresy for the week, calling
Yeah.
you out on your animal
There
judgments.
you go. You have to fill us in, Doug. How much you really know about animals?
Yeah.
So.
I got another quick comment, so we can blast through these ones quickly. But hey, and though Doug's not here, Pastor Doug said in your last Q&A session, cars are not in the Bible. Ask him what's referred to, and Blake, I know you've got the verse up
I got
here.
it open.
In Nahum 2:4. So I'll let you read it first.
This is what it says. The chariots race madly through the streets. They rush to and fro through the squares. They gleam like torches. They dart like lightning.
Aha. Is that a horse-drawn chariot with torches? Let's get his opinion. A car guy would not be pleased to think that cars are not mentioned in the scriptures. I don't want to know that it's not cars.
Yeah, that sounds like cars.
It sounds car-like. I mean, and if Nahum was writing this, then he would have no imagination of what cars could have been. And so,
No.
yeah, chariots with torches on the front. I don't know if I'd guess that, because I feel like that's making it pretty chronocentric, though, because who knows what technology is still yet to come.
Right. Yes. Another 100 years from now.
Right?
With
But what's a car? That's like a chariot back in the day before that. We just teleport now. But no, hey, if car guys have to take solace in the fact that Nahum 2:4 seems to have drag racing,
There you go.
I'm fine with it.
Perfect.
Not a theological hill I'm going to die on.
No, dog.
But
Not at
that's
all.
our quick segment for this week. So, Blake, I'll pass hosting over back to you.
All right, let's get into the questions. Do you find it problematic in today's society with some Christians raising their children without any secular culture? For example, creationist science or no popular music, etc. Is it damaging our children?
I think a strong yes. Huge yes. Watching this amongst my peers, and people that I went to church with, went through kids min, youth min, all that with. But also having spent time as youth leader all through Bible college, even at the end of my high school, and youth pastor, even my own personal story, getting in these Christian bubbles, I think does so much damage, because eventually those kids will be aware of something outside of that. And we've said, I think Doug actually mentioned it last week too, the church has never been about teaching what to think as much as how to think. And when we keep in these bubbles, we do only how or what to think and not at all any how to think. That doesn't mean these kids will end up having to enjoy popular music. Not that I see an issue. That's a whole separate question I'm sure we could wrestle with. Or right. Creationist science. I've made it evident on this podcast I haven't landed there. Those kind of things. It doesn't mean the kids will have to stray away from those thinkings, but at least they're prepared for them, and exposure to all these different things. And so the contrast I've made with a number of things, and not to get into individual circumstances, but I've seen the story over and over and over again with sexuality, with drug use, with alcohol use, kids who have no frame of reference of either thinking or talking. I'm not saying we need to get our kids drinking and smoking stuff, but without even awareness of these concepts to a higher degree or even nuanced conversations about them, I feel like so many kids just get into whatever circumstance, whether it be thinking or practices like the things that I've listed, and the only two options they see are abstain or abuse. And if they cross that line whatsoever, they feel like I may as well be all in on X. Mm-hmm. One drink, may as well have 15.
Yeah, I've already committed the crime.
Right?
Yep.
And so I see that story over and over and over again. And I feel like it's just, first of all, I don't think there was ever supposed to be a Christian culture. I think we were supposed to be people who think and image Jesus in amongst the world, period. I don't think there's a difference, but I don't think there's supposed to be a difference between how do I put this well without sounding like a complete lunatic?
I'm with you so far.
Yeah. I think Adam and Eve were never supposed to be like, hey, if anybody leaves, kick them out, and they can do culture over there.
Yeah.
I think we should be inspired by our God that we serve in the creation He's given us to be. And this is historically what the church has done at different points really strongly. We should be incredible scientists. We should be incredible mathematicians. We should be at the forefront of art in whatever form and capacity it takes, at the forefront of thinking. And instead, we've settled for like cheap knockoffs of all these things, I feel like, the last 70 to 100 years. Like Christian art, Christian music, I'm just going to say it flat out, it's garbage. As a musician, I hate almost all Christian music. Worship music, I'm happy to play it. I would never choose to listen to Christian music. Like that's my least favorite part of church. I'm just putting it all out there. I can't stand CCM. It's just terrible lyrics. It doesn't wrestle. It always resolves so happy, and everything works out in the end. That's not what the Psalms even are. That's not what our Bible is about. And musically, it's boring. So all that to say, we make these bubbles and we're satisfied within them, and then our kids fall apart anytime they are exposed outwards. And I heard of a study recently where 80% of kids, this is American, that are raised in church leave the church after high school. But then 88% of those, when asked why, said it was because of intellectual wrestlings that they had that weren't answered or welcome in the church. And I feel like that applies, though it may not be a intellectual wrestle in as deep as creation science necessarily or anything like that all the time, but it could be, how can you not allow this music or this taste in music or whatever it may be? I think those also fall in that category of intellectual wrestlings and questions. I've said a lot, but I think Christian bubbles is damaging our kids for sure, and I'll stop there.
All right, well, I'll jump in and I'll take up the other side just because well, I'll say this first. I agree with you completely, Kyle.
Right.
But I do have older children than you.
Yeah.
So I've walked as a parent practically further.
Yeah.
And there definitely, as a parent, are moments when I want to protect my children.
For sure.
I can see things in the world that are hurtful. I can see decisions that are being made that I, as a parent, have the ability to control or hold my children back from, right? So I get the idea of a Christian bubble or a parenting bubble or helicopter parent, all those things, whatever you want to call it, to try and help our children from experiencing pain.
Yeah.
Especially even as a parent, most of us have done things, we've failed,
Yeah.
and then we want to keep our kids from failing. So I understand why we would do those things.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say that it's necessarily wrong to parent that way.
Yeah.
But where I agree with you is I think the fact where we don't allow our children to fail,
Yeah.
or we don't allow them to have to struggle intellectually or figure things out.
Yeah.
And I would say even more so, like that's a defensive mindset. Like, how do I keep my children from this thing? What about an offensive mindset? And this is where my wife and I did have a lot of talks about this as our children were growing up, and we kind of landed here where it was like, well, we want our children to be impactful in the world.
Totally.
And if I pull them away from every experience that they can have, a secular experience, there's no way that they're going to be impactful going the other way.
For sure.
So our kids, I do believe, have to have some sort of understanding of what's going on around them so that they can resonate and help other people. They're going to have non-Christian friends. At some point in their life, they're going to bump into somebody, no matter how much I try and protect them.
Yep.
And then do they even understand what those people are talking about?
Yeah.
I know that's my own experience to some degree. Definitely had kids in youth ministry like you call. I did youth ministry for a lot of years, and I saw all that stuff. And I just think the kids who are sheltered the most, I guess if I'm going to use that term, have the least impact.
Yeah.
I see that every time. Whether they go the extreme either way, whether they abstain from things or whether they abuse it, they still just do not have the impact as a witness in our world.
Totally.
And I think that is the mindset that's probably more biblical, is to go out and, make disciples of our world rather than act fearfully or react fearfully and hold our children back.
Totally.
So and I would say this, and this might sound a little crass, but I think it's true. If we're going to lose 80% of our kids anyways, because the stats are the same, it doesn't matter if they've been in great youth groups, if they've been bubbled, if they have not, secular kids, the stats are the same. I've looked at them so many times. If we're going to lose 80% of our kids anyways, why not lose them trying to be on the offensive?
Totally.
Rather than trying to cradle them and hold on to them and lose them anyway. So
you nailed it. I think that it's that balance of age appropriate exposure too.
Absolutely.
Right. To maybe a silly example of like taking my kids right now. We've got Blakely, who's 18 months. We have just now, she's confident to go up and down the stairs on her own. So if I had kept a baby gate or those stairs blocked off right now until this point, but then also till she's 3 and 4 and 5 and 18, I've got the baby gate up trying to protect her. Like, that's just foolishness. And so I think in the same way with their minds and how they're formed and their thinking patterns, all those pieces, at age-appropriate places, we can slowly, as hard as it is for us as parents, slowly start opening those doors and those places where, they could stumble, they could get hurt, they could land in a different place than you, but they may come back to it too. I do appreciate there's a lot of truth in that Proverbs one that we've kind of knocked a lot of time, or raise a child up in the way that they should go. When he's older, he will not depart from it. That doesn't mean he won't wrestle with it in the meantime and in between, and then ultimately maybe land back in there. There's historically in church, people have always left the church in their young adult years and then often come back around, they call it the licenses.
Yeah.
They leave shortly after they get their driver's license and come back shortly after they get their marriage license.
Yeah.
Now
Or children even
totally.
more so. Yeah.
And they get that gap's getting broader and broader now, but they would come back. They'd wrestle. They'd try to figure it out on their own, just like historically that's how society has worked.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come back to those things. And I feel like right now we're so trying to control not letting that gap happen at all. And then therefore I think we're pushing a lot of kids away.
Yeah.
So figuring out that balance is hard. And I say that all, yes, with my oldest is 7. I haven't wrestled with this. And the other part is, this has been a part of Christian culture for so long. I doubt anybody that listens to a podcast and is concerned about how we're raising our kids grew up in any other kind of environment if you grew up in a church, right? This is how we've all been raised to be as parents with those mentalities. And so I don't blame anybody who wrestles with that. But on the end of youth ministry, and you've seen it too, you've attested to, it doesn't seem to be working.
Yeah.
The Christian helicopter almost.
Yeah.
I will shut up.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you. I think you're saying the same thing as me. This is for each parent to decide.
Yep.
I used to tell the teens, I've told my own kids many times, there's no manual.
Yeah.
Right? You don't come into my home with a manual on how to raise you, so we make it up as we go, right? You listen to podcasts, you read good books, you get advice from your parents and help from friends. But every child is different.
Yeah.
And as a parent, you got to decide how that's going to work.
Yeah.
But I would encourage to try and err on the not overly protective side.
Yeah.
I guess that would be, I think it's more helpful to let our kids experience some things.
Totally.
All right, let's move on. Do you believe that youth and young adults that are raised exclusively in purity culture are adequately prepared to have healthy sexual relationships after they are married? So this question kind of follows our other one, I guess. But
are we breaking the second part up there? We'll break it up.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So the first part is: do you believe that youth and young adults that are raised exclusively in purity culture are adequately prepared to have healthy?
Yeah.
Sexual. I didn't read the second part. Okay. Healthy sexual relationships after they're married. That's question one.
Yeah.
The second one is: do you ever feel like purity culture also perpetuates rape culture in some instances?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say that's a different question.
Yeah. We'll break those up for sure.
Okay.
I would say I don't. I can't blanket answer this one. I guess we'd never really blanket answer, though. Our opinions and how we share it are. There's always exemptions. I would say that a lot of people raised in an exclusive purity culture are not adequately prepared to have healthy sexual relationships after they're married. A little known fact, I in Bible college, I majored in counseling. No, a few people would probably guess that by how my personality is wired. I was interested in potentially pursuing psychology after school, so it was more hands-off than counseling. But anyways, total digression there. Within that, there were certain things we looked at from a psychological lens and the counseling lens. And one stat that has stuck with me for a long time was that over a third of Christian women, and this is what this study was referring to specifically, struggle and feel feelings of grossness or inadequacy and all those pieces for up to 3 to 5 years after they're married, and wrestle with having sex with their partner who they're allowed to now, because purity culture has for so long said this is bad. If you do this, you're dirty or used or whatever things it implies, and therefore sex is bad has been trained into our brains so much that once in a healthy marriage setting where that is permissible, the mentality that we've built is hard to then rewire. And so I can't speak to what men overall, but that stat was specifically about women struggle for 3 to 5 years at least into their marriages.
I'll jump in there and just say, to back you up.
Yeah.
And I'll use Mark Driscoll as my guy. So
there you go.
You probably have an opinion on Driscoll if you're listening to this podcast, possibly.
Yeah.
But Mark Driscoll in his book, Real Marriage, the one that got all the hype and all the fame and all the probably shame, I don't know. But he talks a lot about that in one chapter for sure.
Right.
It's been a long time since I read the book. But talking about either sex as God or king.
Yep.
Which is what most males growing up in a purity culture would fall under, right?
Yeah.
We're told you can't have sex until,
Yeah.
so you're waiting until thinking it's going to be the best thing that ever happened to you.
Totally.
Right? So you have the guys dealing with that, which is probably an incorrect image of sex.
Yep.
And then you have women growing up in the same culture, but they will default to sex as gross, which is what you just talked about.
Yep.
We're not supposed to have sex, so obviously there's something wrong with it.
Yep.
So even when they get to marriage, then to mentally make that flip from it's so wrong to now good, lots of problems there.
Totally.
So I will back you in saying that if that is what purity culture is, if that's what's defined as purity culture, then yes, that's probably not adequately preparing our youth and young adults for a healthy sexual relationship.
Yeah, I think that like we're probably more talking on what I was exposed to as purity culture for the main part, but it may lean towards the extreme end of how it's taught. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's people who have taken purity culture language and used it and applied it well and all those pieces, but I feel like there's a lot of issue here for men. You've addressed that part of coming in thinking sex is going to be this amazing, mind-blowing, so cool, the greatest thing ever. It's going to happen whenever I want it because that's what I've been promised all through my teenage years. That and for men, I've seen the story over and over and over again and wrestled with it myself. It objectifies women of like, hey, once I get there, this is my prize for holding on, and therefore this is what's owed to me in the realm of big picture. Maybe not even saying my wife owes this to me, but like this is what's owed to me through the Bible is what it's been taught to me.
Well, and then when you're let down, because that's just
which
not
will happen.
real, then sex is still king, so you're still looking for that outlet, and men will go to any other outlet, right? You get into pornography, you get into sexual misconduct, all those things can happen because you're still trying to satisfy that idea that sex is God, basically.
Yeah, and statistically in the church, there's no difference of porn use statistically amongst male or female in the church than there is outside of it. And so that seems to perpetuate, again, continued use and looking to that that those stats, guys in the church are looking for it, and I think as a result of the purity culture stuff. So I wouldn't say everybody. I'm sure some people have figured it out, maybe stumbled through it. Maybe some people were taught well, but I feel like purity culture in its extreme version, how it's presented at least the last 20, 30 years, I would say, what's that guy, I Kiss Dating Goodbye, what's his name? That one's come under big scrutiny now. And even when I read it, and talking with people following in this age, even chatting and hearing from, even listening on podcasts to different women who struggled with it, where they were sexually abused, and all those pieces, or made decisions before they came to faith, and then all of a sudden this is the culture they come into, feeling so dirty and used and gross and worthless. And our worth should be not in any abstinence we can keep, or in any failings that have happened, or anything that's happened to us. Our worth is in Christ alone, period. So I think that we've put that on such a high pedestal that I think I would safely say you can't get through purity culture as it's been known, and though we haven't really defined it properly here, but as it's been popularly expressed and known, doesn't set people up for a healthy sexual relationship.
Although, and I don't know, you can back me up, you're more read and everything, statistically, I've heard that those who have lived biblically, so have abstained from sex until marriage, have healthier sexual relationships. I've done some studies on that because I've always been curious. But I would also say, so whether those stats are true or not, you can take a shot at me. I'm fine.
Right.
But I would say practically in my life, the men anyways, I obviously don't have as many conversations with women about this, and I probably shouldn't. But with the men that I've had conversations with, the men that I know that have the best sexual relationships inside of marriage are those who did live pure until marriage. And I think biblically we have to believe that God is true, that he didn't give us, these rules to abstain until marriage, knowing that was going to fail us. That if done properly, that will result in healthy relationship.
Yes, and I totally agree with you there, and I think that that's a big misnomer that people have assumed. Purity culture equates to perfect biblical sexuality. Right, and so I would absolutely agree with the tenets of scriptural sexuality, where within marriage and not until then, and all those people, and no pornography is an issue. I would agree with all those. It's the purity culture. One individual remaining pure at this high status we can attain and achieve that becomes the issue. We've I think in some ways purity culture perpetuates making an idol out of our sexuality. Just as much as it accuses the world of making an idol out of sexuality, I think purity culture does the exact same.
Oh, it totally does.
Right? So I think biblical sexuality can be and is different than purity culture as it's known. And yes, I think following anything that God has given us will lead to flourishing, including in our sex lives. But I don't know if purity culture equates to biblical only.
And I would say, again, if the purity culture is defined, and I don't know if it is, but if it comes across anyways as abstain or burn, then yes, that's not setting you up for health, right? But we would hope that parents, you're the ones who have the big say in this. Are you teaching your children to respect their spouse or their friends or like the other gender or however you want to talk about that? Because that is going to lead to a healthy relationship, which should also lead towards healthy sexuality, right?
Totally.
That's the much bigger thing than just setting sex up as an idol, as you said.
Totally. I don't. So I don't think it's purity culture or hedonism.
Right.
I don't think those are the two binary choices. And I think there's lots of ways to express that. Allie and I were having a great chat this morning about complementarianism versus egalitarianism. And I think there are lots of incredible husbands who are complementarian,
Yeah.
who can do an awesome job. Not every complementarian husband's a jerk.
That's absolutely
Just like
true.
every egalitarian husband's not awesome and
Yes.
right. So it goes both ways. There's lots of ways to express healthy Christian sexuality, but I don't know if I'm just feel like I'm restating myself now. But yeah.
All right. Well, let's jump on to the next question then, or the second part of that question says, do you ever feel like purity culture also perpetuates rape culture in some instances?
Yes, I do, and I think I can let you.
Yeah, I would say, I'll let you talk, but I would say the same thing. That
Yeah.
I think that we kind of answered that in the first question. If you set sex up to be God or be king or the most important thing,
Yep.
then yes, you are
Yep.
setting people up to crave that and have wicked thoughts about it, right?
Totally, and I think on the other end, you can put the female, and I've talked with males who have been sexually abused too, where you put that in such a place where I feel worthless, so now I'll offer this up. And I think rape can happen even if somebody feels as though, and this is a big popular conversation in culture right now, rape can happen even if somebody feels as though they are consenting in the moment.
Yeah.
Why are they consenting? Because they feel completely worthless, and therefore I'll offer myself up. Were they actually able to consent in that moment? I don't think so. And I will also make sure to put a caveat in here. Rape can happen within marriage. Like that can take place where somebody pressuring their spouse to have sex and forcing them to do so because God said it and this is what I'm owed. That happens within marriages as well. So it's not like we cross this threshold and now everything's permissible even if somebody didn't feel like it. Rape happens there too.
Yeah.
And I think purity culture and the minds we've shaped carry into marriage and can also continue that habit on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. While Jesus was on earth, do you think the disciples kept up animal sacrifices? What type of sacrifices do you think the disciples would have offered upon Jesus' death, especially Peter? When did animal sacrificing disappear? For the most part, I have seen it done in different countries, and it was gradual. And the question is, was it gradual or was there a decree?
That is an awesome question.
Yeah, lots of pieces in there, but they're all interconnected.
This is something I haven't read a lot to even comment on. I would guess animal sacrifices were done in 70 AD. Then some of the followers of Jesus were still alive. Then we get John's writings in the late 90s.
Yeah.
So for sure, then whether they were continuing them or that, when the temple's destroyed in 70 AD, the sacrificial system ended with it. That's why even modern Jews don't have the sacrificial system continuing.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
Yeah. So at the very least, if it did continue, it was for a short time. If Jesus was born around 4 to 6 BCE, died at 33, we're now at 29 AD. So by time from there to 70, you've got a 40-year window. I would guess, though, early thinking by what Paul writes, by what Hebrews writes, I would say it was pretty quick within Christianity that they weren't participating in that, if they were at all, because they see Jesus as that final sacrifice, and that's early in our writings. I would guess not, but they were still going to the temple, so maybe that was a part of it.
I just had an interesting thought as you were saying that. I would say yes.
Right.
Jesus, remember which disciple is it they need to pay the temple tax.
Right.
And he goes and fishes and pulls out the fish and there's a coin in the fish's mouth.
Right.
Really elaborate way to get money. But
Yeah.
but obviously if they were doing that, I would assume they were also bringing their sacrifice to the temple.
Yeah.
But it would be funny because Jesus and his disciples, Jesus would not be carrying a sacrifice.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah,
He'd be the
totally.
only guy, like, where's your sacrifice? I haven't sinned this week.
Yeah. Totally. So yeah, like it could have happened, but then I guess early on though, like you've got Paul wrestling, and his writings are some of the earliest we've got in the New Testament. He's already wrestling with the Gentile embedding with the Christianity, and so that stuff's coming as early as 20 years into Christianity, and it seems to be done by then. Paul's not asking them to do that. He's not even asking them for circumcision anymore.
Nope.
So it was a quick turn whenever it took place. I don't know, like Jesus declaring forgiveness over people before he even dies, which is a whole other conversation. If on the cross is the forgiveness for sins, how did Jesus forgive sins pre-cross? Totally fishing for more questions there. Maybe, I don't know if they need it or not.
And Peter, so here's the one question kind of embedded in here.
Yeah.
So would Peter have offered a sacrifice for the betrayal of Jesus? I don't know if I can think of and obviously there's like 614 laws in the
13, I think.
Old Testament,
613,
yeah, 600 and some.
Yeah.
So is there a betrayal one? Do you have to sacrifice an animal for betraying your friend?
False witness would be.
Yeah.
That's right in the 10. That's a big one.
That's true.
Bearing false witness.
So you'd have to look that up. So sorry, I don't have the answer, but you'd have to go to Leviticus probably and read through till you'll find the one.
Now, our wrestling with it indicates there was no writing of it. Hopefully that's obvious. It's not that we haven't read our New Testaments to have come across that. We've read our New Testaments enough. There is no notice of it. So at the very least, it was a conversation that by the time the New Testament authors wrote, it was settled and done with. And they didn't even bother to write it backwards into their accounts. I'm going to land at a big I don't know.
Yeah, I guess you stumped us.
Good
question.
Awesome.
We just know that if there's not many writings about it, it did end. Like we understand that. So
yeah, and for sure by 70 AD.
Yeah,
even if it did. So cool.
All right, we'll move on. So the next question says, I just listened to Laura Lee and Blake talk about wolves in sheep's clothing. That's from our Sermon on the Mount. One of the messages in there, that wolves in sheep's clothing produce bad fruit. And I started to think about someone like Ravi Zacharias, who produced very meaningful books before he was outed as a very mean pervert. Yeah. Then I thought about the disciples coming to see Jesus, about those who were preaching without his authority, and Jesus saying, let them do so as long as their message is good. I personally am repulsed by many American preachers, but then there are these contradictions, as I have mentioned above, of good fruit coming from rotten trees. Is it just a matter of branches that need to be cut off, or what?
Mm-hmm. Awesome question. Trying to figure out even where to begin with this one. I'll start with my own personal wrestling with this. I've got a number of Ravi Zacharias books on my shelf that right now I'm going, what do I do with these? Mm-hmm. I don't know all the history on Ravi. I have read a good amount that I feel like I tried to keep up for a little bit of the history, but I don't remember anything stating how far back some of the sexual misconducts go. So
is that the cutoff line then?
What's that?
Is that the cutoff line? Any
no,
books
and that's
written
what
pre
I'm
are
wrestling
good,
with, right?
but any books written post are bad?
Well, I mean, for sure. Like, I know we've referenced Mark Driscoll, and so we both have listened to this podcast, The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. Excellent work as well. Absolutely. And I go, even up till the very end, there are good things that I still wrestle with that Mark said that are good and that are true. C.S. Lewis once said this, that though Christianity is the highest truth, we would be foolish to think that other religions don't bear some truth. Right. Like there's these statements of the mess of it coming out. And I'll add one more example before I guess I try to land a little bit of the plane. I have a friend who has this tree that's dying in his backyard. I was visiting him while I was in Ontario a few months ago. And it's like all dead, and he's worried he's going to fall over and hit his neighbor's house or knock his fence down, all these pieces. And so he called a friend of his who's an arborist to ask him to pull it down. And the arborist said, no, we can't take that down. It's a rare species of tree. I'm not legally allowed to take that down until it's completely dead. And he points up, and there's like 6 leaves on the tree. That was enough life to keep it going. And so he wasn't allowed to cut it down until then. And so then I look at all these pieces, and I go, if we go to the extremes, there's 2 options. Either A, we got to go total thumbs up. Let's keep every conniving person out there who's got anything out there. Let's just keep them going because they have good things, and let's justify it by their numbers or their sales or their whatever, the whole beast we've made of Christian consumerism. Or 2, everybody's going to disappoint us one day, so let's get them all off the stages and let's just all do Christianity as individuals. And I don't think either of those extremes works. Nope. And so what we're left with is we're stuck in the mess. We're, as we put it last week, welcome to Babylon. There is no such thing as saying, well, if you pass this test at the beginning of your ministry, you can be a pastor for as long as you shall choose. That doesn't happen. And so I think we have to, first of all, I think we as Christians have put pastors oftentimes, and I'm speaking to how people may be even hearing my voice right now, we've put pastors on too high of a pedestal at times. we have entrusted them with too much, and then when they fall, I've watched too many people wrestle with their faith, with their theology, with everything so deeply because we put trust not in Jesus and what those people were saying, but in them themselves. And so somebody like Ravi could have started off his ministry awesome. I'm sure he did. I can't get to the point of imagining there's people out there, although I'm sure there could be. But I try not to go to the place where there's people who are like, hey, you know what? This whole church audience, they'd be a great group of people to manipulate. I'm going to start out a ministry in their heads in order to manipulate people. I just don't think anybody starts there. But I can...
That's just too big.
Right?
Like, you're going to devote your whole life to running a Christian ministry so that you can trick people.
Right? So, and then I look, I go all that, and I think we've also set the bar really high. Maybe this is going to get me stoned. I'm thankful YouTube doesn't have a stone them button. I think we've put the people who wrote our Bible on too high of a pedestal that then we expect the same for our modern day pastors. Like, look at Peter who writes, and we go, man, the book of Peter in there at the end, it's incredible. It's fantastic. He denied Jesus to people, outright, and then he gets called out by Paul in front of people for being a hypocrite. Yeah. We look at every biblical character, and they're all broken and flawed. So to say that is to say, first of all, our Bible is brought together by broken people who God uses to do something greater than they themselves. And if we apply the same hermeneutic, I guess, to how we look at people in ministry, we should always expect these are broken people who God is able to use in some way, shape, or form. And when they disappoint us, know that God is good and people are broken. And so I look at the stories of this and I go, yes, absolutely. There needed to be, to steal some of your language, branches that needed to be cut off in a guy like Ravi. There was pruning that needed to happen in his life that never took place, and so the end result, it was continuously growing of bad fruit. I think there was accountability that was needed there, and we've listed Mark and all those pieces. I fight hard to make sure I've got good accountability in my life so that, because I see these stories and I go, I know how they could get there. Yeah. I see how that can happen. So I don't look at him and go, ugh, I'm so much better than him. I go, man, he made those choices all along the road to get there, and without the accountability, without the pruning, easily got there. I think our broader system in Christian culture has allowed for more bad fruit than it should. We've put people up on pedestals. We've claimed success in worldly terms equates to godliness and therefore good. We've substituted numbers for character. There's so many things I could list here.
Yeah, and I think that's worth saying again. Just equating success in worldly terms, especially numbers, does not equal godliness.
Totally.
And that, I would say, probably for Ravi Zacharias, I don't know him as well. I don't know his story as well. Yeah. But there's no doubt there has been many Christian leaders who have had too much power and not enough accountability.
Totally.
And we as the sheep, going back to the first thought there, are way too easy to give these people that kind of authority, and then even protect them in that authority because, well, they must be doing something good, right? Yeah. But I'd also think of the parable of the wheat and the tares, where Jesus tells about, some evil men go out and sow weeds among the wheat. Yeah. And then, the people ask, should we go out and pick up all the weeds? Totally. And Jesus says, no, because if you do, you will also uproot the good wheat. Yeah. You need to wait until the field is ripe and then harvest it and then separate the wheat from the weeds or from the tares. Yeah. So Jesus seems to be saying that we need to live in this mess or this brokenness. Yeah. But I don't think that gives, I think we need to do the work on the front end, not find these leaders or, I think the question says some Christian leaders that they're repulsed by or whatever. We've let them get too far when we get to that point. Yeah. Right? Totally. There should have been all those accountabilities and things much earlier. But even in that Mars Hill podcast, one of the things that the guy narrating says is that we've always wanted a king. And he talks right back to the Israelites saying they were told by God, do not go this way because there will be a cost and a consequence. Yeah. But they wanted a king. They wanted a hero so badly to worship that they just allowed that to happen. And they paid all the cost of that. And he makes the deal that we will still do that, even, using Mark Driscoll as the example.
Yeah.
As long as he's doing good and looks like the hero,
Yeah.
we will allow a whole bunch of bad stuff to happen in the wake of that, right?
Totally.
So we need to be better at that.
Yeah. So I look at what this question is, and again, I don't have there's no final answer. Like it's welcome to the mess that we're all wrestling with, and I do feel like this time in church history has been really good for exposing some of these things. Like I am really thankful for that, as painful as it is, and there is a big cost to it. I think there's people leaving the church in droves as a result of these things that are being exposed now that we should have been pruning for a long time.
Yeah.
So there's a cost to it, but I see the hope at the end that we are being refined as a church. If we will lean into it, it'll be less painful, I hope.
Yeah.
But if we as a broader church, not just Living Springs, that we're leaning into these things saying we want what Jesus wants for us, and we know we have failed, so let's bring in the system. I like the contrast back to the Old Testament, and God was constantly working with Israel to even refine how they were led.
Yeah.
His ultimate goal was to bring to himself a family.
Right.
And they go, well, that doesn't really work for us, God. So then they get the judges, and they get all these other leaders, and they get the king as they hoped for. And then we get back to the New Testament language, and the language there is brother and sister.
Yeah.
Back to this family. Let's work together. Now, even within a family, there's a system of authority.
It is a mess.
And a family's a mess too. But it's this more relational thing, and I feel like we've stepped away from relational. I was repulsed, to be honest, in one of my biblical or pastoral theology classes, and ever since I've heard pastors compared to CEOs.
Yeah.
And I go, that is so far from what we're supposed to be as the church. It's this guy up there who gets paid big bucks to make big decisions and he drives the company for results. Like that is so far from New Testament Christianity.
Well, and it leads to
everything
a conversation I had last night, which is way different, but this one comment, my God-given right.
Yes.
And I was like, hang on, what?
Totally.
What's a God-given right?
Totally.
But if we think of our leaders as CEOs and we think of success based on that kind of ideal, then it's easy to slide into the thinking that I have God-given rights and I need to stand up for them or whatever else.
Yeah. So welcome to the mess. That's all we can say, really. But
all right, I think we got room for one more question here.
Sure.
All right. Question that I am debating because I watch too much of Al Jazeera. If the people that are dying, hunger, political, war, etc., all over the majority of the world are Christian, how do they view prayer, or how do they view prayers that are not answered? The root of the causes of their pain and death comes from sin. Hence, the sin of others is killing them. Mm-hmm. The church knows the principles that triune God demands all of us. Then how does God view this, and what is the judgment? Why God uses those that cannot fend for themselves, or why does he use people like that? I think using and abusing is kind of the implication there.
Yeah.
Will they continue to die until the church takes a stand against politics? That's the end of the question.
I don't know if we should have started this one.
As I read it, I'm like, oh, there's some deeper stuff there.
There's some really good stuff, big stuff. Blake, I've started off. Why don't you, if you want to kick in? I've started off all of them.
Well, I guess I'll start with the prayer idea, right? Like, what do we do with unanswered prayers? And I'll start it here, and then you can tell me if we're crazy and off base. But I'll start it by saying I view Christianity through my years and experience where I've landed today is that God doesn't give us an easy course. Like there's no promise that I can find in my Bible where if I follow Jesus, then life is easy for me.
No.
Or it's wealthy for me, or it's healthy for me, or it's even maybe what I want. It doesn't promise that I will get what I want.
Yeah.
And I do see that as a problem, especially in North American Christianity. I don't know how that is around the rest of the world.
Yeah.
But this idea that if we get Jesus, then I get what I want.
Yeah.
And if that is my theology or my thinking of what God does for me, then I'm going to have a hard time when God doesn't answer prayer the way I want him to.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have a hard time seeing the world in turmoil and going, this God obviously doesn't love us. This is the end result of this thinking because these people aren't getting what they want.
Yeah.
Or even I could take it further and say what they think they deserve or whatever else. So
Totally.
I would say we can get in trouble when our theology is not correct as to what we are accepting when we bring Jesus into our life.
Yeah, totally. I think maybe to paint with broad strokes at the very least to start, I think all of this question can be looked at through an individualistic Christianity lens, something that I think is quite foreign, or more foreign at least than we attribute to the New Testament. One thing I've been pointing out to people, if you read through your New Testament with the mentality that most of the yous that you read, you do this or whatever, if you read most of them, you're more likely to get a plural you than a individual you.
Yeah.
So read it y'all instead of you, right? I was talking with somebody about your body's a temple. That's not an individual thing. That's Paul speaking to that local body.
Yeah.
Y'all's body is a temple, would be better. And so we have individualized the thinking so much in Western Christianity, we fail to see, and I think this question is alluding to it, and I really appreciate where you're going with the thinking and what you're wrestling with. I know this word's charged right now, so forgive me because there's no better word. The systemic result of sin and the system, the way that Paul puts it, the principalities and powers that we have as humanity given power over to. So though, yes, God can work in individual lives, we also collectively as humans, until Christ's full kingdom comes established, there will be power given to Satan, the principalities and powers that we are really wrestling with, the dragon, Revelation, the enemy, the accuser, whatever name you want to use for the power opposed to the way of Jesus, has power no matter in systems until every individual turns, not just the church, because I think even if the church turns, there's still people in power that do not follow Jesus, and therefore those systems can be broken, people are suffering. I think this also goes beyond just individual sin in the sense of greed. Let's say every moral sin came off the table immediately, and just nobody ever did them again. Take greed, take selfishness, take sexual stuff that we've already talked about off the table, and it doesn't happen anymore. I still think how we've lived, maybe this is begging more questions, I'm not meaning to do it, how we've treated our climate so far, how we've treated our environment, we are bearing the fruit of that with global warming, with suffering, with humidity, with whatever way you want to talk about it, with more fires, with more floods in BC right now. These are some of the things that are happening as a result of our language, and the system that we live in, university, the cosmos, as Paul puts it, is broken and yearning for fixing. So I think we've got such a relationship of individual Christianity that, yes, we can pray and God can want to work, but he, in giving us freedom, has allowed these systems to exist as well as our individual autonomy. And therefore there's brokenness until all of Jesus comes back and his kingdom is brought in, which, yes, means all Christians have repented and all those pieces, but that means the whole rest of the world has by that standard. So,
yeah, unfortunately, I think brokenness is in our world to stay here, probably until Christ returns. So, yeah, it's not fun watching these things in the news or seeing, horror stories or knowing about people in different countries being, persecuted and unjustly hurt in many ways. Yeah. It's not fun to hear those stories in our own country. It's different, but it exists here too. We're not as godly as we think, right? Nope. There's evil here too. Yeah. I'll jump to the end of that question. It says, will they continue to die until the church takes a stand against politics? I think we always need to be careful when we use that word, take a stand. Immediately I thought of Micah 6:8, which says this: he has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice. Yeah. If you stop that verse there, then you would say the answer to the question would be yes, we need to take a stand against politics, we need to take a stand against evil people, we need to, against the systems you talked about, we need to go and fight. Yeah. But unfortunately, the verse doesn't stop there. It goes on to say, so it requires of you to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. Yeah. So it doesn't, again, so now it's not the other extreme. Don't
Yeah.
You should take a stand. It's not saying don't take a stand.
Yeah.
It's saying we do need to fight for justice. God requires that of us.
Yeah.
But we must do it while we walk humbly with God.
Yeah.
And that is probably the hardest ask.
Yeah.
But that's the way we're supposed to do it.
Totally.
We need to fight for these people's lives. We need to care for others. We need to fight against evil. But we must do it without being evil ourselves.
Totally.
And that's the catch there.
Yeah. Well, I would counter to the end of the question, will this continue until the church takes a stand against politics? I actually think, and maybe this is going to be a hot take, I think the church needs to get more political, but the issue is we've become partisan instead of being political about the kingdom that we are claimed to be a part of, and we get stuck in these earthly politic systems instead of being about the politics that we've been handed.
Right.
That verse there, the just do justice, that word justice can also be translated, and I wish it was more often in our Bibles, righteousness.
Righteousness.
Right? Because judgment often just gets understood as retributive. Like, hey, this has already been done, so take care of that and make it right. No. But instead, doing righteousness is forward thinking. I look to the early church who would volunteer themselves to be thrown into the lions instead of somebody else. I look at early church history where they ran into cities that were locked off with plagues so that they could take care of the sick, of the wounded, and all those who were starting hospitals.
They're the first responders.
Right. Like we were doing righteousness. We were absolutely getting political.
See, and I think I'm going to interrupt you there because I just think, and I don't know who asked this question, and I don't mean any disrespect against them.
Yeah.
But I know I could write this question.
Yep.
And if I wrote that question, I would not be meaning when I say take a stand against politics.
Yeah.
I am not meaning run into a city and be a first responder.
Totally.
I'm not meaning sacrificing myself in the lion's den instead of somebody else.
Yep.
I'm meaning like fighting someone and beating them down and telling them to do right.
Totally. And we've our imaginations, and I've just been captured by this idea the last year, what our Christian imagination actually would be, how we look at the world and the potential, and our imaginations are so dull sometimes within the systems that we've got. Back to even the Christian art part, right? When we say politics, we assume this side or that side. I can look at the right and the left and critique both them and love parts about both them.
Yep.
Like, look at, I won't get into all this, but
that's easily said. Yes.
Totally, right? And I look at these things and go, you know what? We should be maybe in some ways more broken when we see our Muslim brothers and sisters or our Hindu brothers and sisters being persecuted in their country, because we go, you know what? Love our Christian brothers and sisters, and we'll fight for them too, but we know where their hope lies.
Yeah.
When we see somebody else being marginalized, killed, suffering, starving, whatever, we should be more broken for them because we know that they have not yet grabbed onto the hope of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Right? And so we need to get more about kingdom politics and less worried about the systems of this world. The right and left are both hellbound in my mind. And not to just say centrist is where it's not about that. It's not just being middlemen. It's being about the kingdom and what Jesus has given us to be. And so, yes, Jesus told us, in this world you will have trouble. That means pain. That means death. That means hunger. That means politics. That means war. That means all these things until his kingdom is fully established. And he's given us the hope, the joy, the peace, the love to be a part of setting that up until he comes back and fully establishes it. I don't buy the part that we just got to suck back to our Christian cultures because the world's getting worse and worse and worse. Yeah. That is such a dangerous mentality. I'm not saying that you might be able to say it's going to happen eschatologically. Maybe there's just less Christians. I don't know. I just say I don't think that should be our mentality of let's pack her up, pull away to our bubbles, and protect ourselves till Jesus' anger comes down. Mm-hmm. I think we got to be about these things. And, yeah, it's going to keep happening. I believe it is part of God's judgment, and a whole other question we could get into is what is God's judgment? I think God's judgment is less him acting out judgment as much as it is him releasing us, the Romans language, handing us over to our choices, to the things we've done. Christian or unchristian, we as humanity have given power over to the principalities and powers that God did not want to be in charge. And then we are reaping the results of where we've put our allegiance power. That doesn't mean every individual. This goes right back to Jesus' question that he gets posed. This man's blind. Who sinned, him or his parents? No. This individual is a part of a system where we have all sinned and we are all screwing this whole thing up.
Yep.
And so we have to wait into Jesus' hope. Sometimes we benefit from that. Sometimes we suffer because of it. Blessed are you when they say all sorts of evil things about you because of me. Jesus knows this is going to take place. We are going to be persecuted for him. But I think we need to be stepping into it because our ultimate hope isn't in the restoration of this world.
I really like that, Kyle. You did a good job. And I'll re-quote the one thing you said because I think, to me, it was so good.
Right.
That being a Christian is not standing in the middle.
Right.
Right? It's not choosing to not take sides.
Yeah.
It's choosing to walk as Jesus walked.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a friend last night who's really struggling with forgiveness.
Right.
That's it.
Yep.
Right?
Totally.
This is this Christian life we choose to live.
Yep.
Is that we live surrendered and willing to forgive when we shouldn't.
Yep.
Right? There should be justice that we demand.
Yep.
And when I mean justice, not righteousness,
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
But the righteousness is to walk as Jesus walked.
Yep.
And that's the goal.
Yep.
So I think we can land the plane there, as you said earlier.
Yeah, before we rile ourselves up further, but yeah.
Right on. We enjoyed that this week. Keep sending your questions in, and we'll keep answering them.
We've got only four left. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, only
All right.
4 left. So we need some more because we just flew through 4 today. So we need more.
You bet. All right. Have a good